His footprints ended in the middle of a frozen lake. The ice was 5 feet thick. He didn't fall through, he just stopped existing. Tonight I'm bringing you 5 documented cases from the Canadian wilderness where reality broke its own rules. These aren't urban legends or campfire stories. These are official police files, search and rescue reports, autopsy findings that make no sense, people who vanished in ways that physics can't explain, bodies found in conditions that biology says are impossible, survivors who came back, changed. If you're new here, hit subscribe. We cover the cases that keep investigators awake at night, the ones that never make it to trial because there's no suspect, no motive, no explanation. Turn off the lights, put in your headphones, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about how this world works. Let's begin. The ice held 3,000 pounds without a whisper of protest. Then Ethan walked across it and disappeared into physics that refused to make sense. January 2018, Northern Ontario. A mining camp 400 kilometers from the nearest hospital, where winter doesn't just arrive, it devours everything warm and breathing. Ethan measured ice for a living, checked its integrity, trusted his equipment more than most men trust their instincts. He'd walked that frozen lake dozens of times, knew every meter of its surface like the back of his own hand. The morning he vanished, he woke at 5:30. Made coffee, left before sunrise. Nothing unusual, nothing wrong. By noon, when his radio stayed silent, his supervisor felt the first cold finger of dread. They found his tracks halfway across the lake, perfect boot prints in fresh snow, steady gait, no deviation, then nothing, not at a crack in the ice, not near any disturbance. The footprints just ended, mid-stride, as if something had plucked him from existence itself. The search team stood there in the screaming silence, staring at the last imprint of his boot. Beyond it, pristine snow stretching toward infinity. They drilled through the ice where his tracks stopped, nearly 5 feet thick, solid, impossible to fall through even if you tried. No fractures, no displaced water, no sign he'd ever stood there at all. They searched in widening circles, helicopters, dogs, divers beneath the ice. Nothing, not a shred of clothing, not a piece of equipment. 100 square kilometers searched, 500 man-hours logged. Ethan had ceased to exist at a single point on a frozen lake, and reality offered no explanation. 3 weeks later, a trapper named Robert saw someone in the deep wilderness, 40 kilometers from where Ethan disappeared. A figure at the tree line, motionless, wearing dark clothing and an orange safety vest. Robert called out. The figure turned, just slightly, and Robert glimpsed the profile. The height was right, the build matched, the vest identical. Robert shouted Ethan's name. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it began walking backward into the forest, not turning around, not looking where it moved, walking backward between the trees with unnatural fluidity, as if the forest itself was swallowing it whole. Robert ran forward, crashing through snow. When he reached the tree line, nothing, no tracks, no broken branches, no sign anyone had been there. He searched for an hour, expanding outward in desperation. The forest gave him only silence. When he reported what he'd seen, investigators took him seriously. His story never changed. Every detail remained identical through multiple interviews. He insisted the figure had matched Ethan's description. He insisted it moved impossibly. He insisted there were no tracks. Another search was launched. More resources deployed. They found nothing. The mining company built a road around the lake afterward, officially for efficiency. Actually, because no one would walk where Ethan's footprints ended. Workers reported feeling watched when crossing the ice. Shadows moved in peripheral vision, vanishing when you turned to look. Something had gone wrong in that place, wrong in a way that broke the rules we pretend govern this world. Robert never trapped that area again. The image haunted him, that figure gliding backward into darkness, turning away from everything human. He told friends it wasn't entirely human, and something in his voice made them believe him. Ethan's family still searches for closure. His mother described him as responsible, careful, not someone who took risks. His father spoke of Ethan's respect for the wilderness and its dangers. Neither could comprehend what had happened. Neither can anyone else. The official file remains open. The footprints remain etched in collective memory. And somewhere in the frozen north, the wilderness keeps its secrets locked behind walls we cannot see. His footprints ended in the middle of a frozen lake. The ice was 5 feet thick. He didn't fall through, he just stopped existing. Tonight I'm bringing you 10 documented cases from the Canadian wilderness where reality broke its own rules. These aren't urban legends or campfire stories. These are official police files, search and rescue reports, autopsy findings that make no sense. People who vanished in ways that physics can't explain. Bodies found in conditions that biology says are impossible. Survivors who came back, changed. If you're new here, hit subscribe. We cover the cases that keep investigators awake at night, the ones that never make it to trial because there's no suspect, no motive, no explanation. Turn off the lights, put in your headphones, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about how this world works. Let's begin. Olivia taught 4th grade in a prairie town where everyone knew your name before you introduced yourself. She lived alone in a farmhouse 15 kilometers outside town, surrounded by fields that stretched toward horizons too far to measure. November 14th, 1995, first snow of the season, cold enough to see your breath indoors if you stood near the windows. Olivia came home from school around 6:30, groceries in hand, plans to grade papers, normal. Safe. Another Wednesday, vanishing into routine. At 8:47 p.m. she called 911. Her voice was calm, too calm, like someone forcing control over terror trying to claw its way out. She reported scratching sounds on her basement door. Persistent, deliberate, getting louder. The dispatcher kept her talking. Officers were 20 minutes away. Olivia said she'd locked everything, she always did. Living alone in isolation taught you that lesson fast. Then the scratching stopped. 5 seconds of silence. Olivia's breathing changed. She said something was now inside the basement. Heavy footsteps. Slow. Climbing the stairs. The dispatcher urged her to leave immediately, out the front door, into her truck, drive away. Olivia said she couldn't. The basement door was right at the bottom of the main staircase. She'd have to pass it to escape. She was upstairs in her bedroom with the door locked. The dispatcher suggested the window, climb onto the porch roof, get out, survive. Olivia agreed. Then the footsteps stopped again. Everything went quiet. The dispatcher told her this was her moment. Move now while she could. Olivia started toward the window. Then she made a sound, a sharp intake of breath. She said someone was standing at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at her bedroom door. The dispatcher asked how she knew if her door was locked. Olivia said she could see through the gap at the bottom. Work boots, men's work boots, standing perfectly still. The recording captured what happened next. Wood, splintering, Olivia screaming, sounds of struggle, something hitting the floor. Then the line went dead. Officers arrived 27 minutes after the initial call. The front door was unlocked, inside, neat and orderly, no disturbance. The basement door was closed. Upstairs, Olivia's bedroom door was off its hinges, lying inside the room. The wood around the lock shattered, not cracked, but obliterated, as if hit with force that shouldn't exist in a quiet farmhouse. Olivia was in the basement, lying on her back at the bottom of the stairs, arms at her sides, eyes open, positioned as if someone had carefully placed her there. No pulse. The autopsy found no cause of death, no wounds, no strangulation marks, no poison, no drugs. Her heart had simply stopped. A healthy, 32-year-old woman. No medical reason for cardiac arrest. Cause of death, undetermined. The basement door showed deep gouges on the exterior, scratches consistent with fingernails or tools. But the door was locked from the inside. Deadbolt engaged. No way to lock it from outside. The basement itself undisturbed. No footprints in the dust. No displaced items. No evidence anyone had been there. The phone line had been cut outside the house. Cleanly severed. Likely with wire cutters. But here's what made investigators' skin crawl. The phone company confirmed the line had been cut at least 15 minutes before Olivia called 911. A severed phone line cannot transmit a call. Yet the call existed. The recording existed. The dispatcher had logged it. Officers had responded to it. The call had traveled through a dead line. No one interviewed had seen unfamiliar vehicles. No one heard screams. No one noticed anything wrong. Olivia's life revealed no enemies, no conflicts, no reason anyone would want to harm her. Her wallet was untouched, nothing stolen, no signs of sexual assault. Just a woman who died without cause after calling for help through a phone that shouldn't have worked. 3 weeks later, investigators discovered something else. The Hendersons, Olivia's nearest neighbors, reported scratching sounds on their basement door. Late at night, persistent, terrifying. Their dogs refused to go near certain areas of their property. Mr. Henderson had seen someone standing at the edge of their field multiple times, always at dusk, always motionless. When he approached, the figure would disappear. The Hendersons moved away permanently in 1997. They said something was wrong with that land, wrong in a way that made staying impossible. Other families began reporting similar experiences. Sounds that matched no known animal, tracks that appeared and vanished without logic, a sense of wrongness that saturated the air itself. The case went cold. Olivia's family held a memorial, tried to find closure, never stopped hoping for answers. The farmhouse was eventually sold. Some owners reported odd occurrences, others didn't. But here's what remains certain. On November 14, 1995, Olivia called for help through a dead phone line. She described an intruder who left no evidence. She died without visible cause. Her body was moved by someone who left no trace. And somewhere in the prairie darkness, the truth remains buried beneath questions we cannot answer. The recording still exists in police archives, a woman's voice describing the impossible moments before she vanished from a locked room. Mason specialized in salvaging the unsalvageable, old buildings no one else wanted to touch, structures too damaged, too forgotten, too haunted by time. Spring 2003, British Columbia, an abandoned Anglican church 50 years past its last congregation. The building had been empty since 1984, slowly rotting under coastal rain and the weight of silence. Mason was hired to assess it for renovation, turn it into a community center, serving scattered rural families. April 8th, his second day on site. He was removing damaged pews when he noticed something behind the altar. A section of wall that sounded hollow when he knocked. He pried away the paneling. Behind it, a crude framework of boards, deliberately constructed to seal off a space. Someone had built a false wall to hide something. Mason felt unease prickling his spine, but continued. Renovation work revealed strange things. This probably wasn't different. He removed more paneling, creating an opening large enough to see through. What his flashlight revealed made his stomach twist into knots. A hidden room, 3 meters square. And on the floor, dozens of children's shoes, arranged in perfect concentric circles, 3 rings, one inside the next. Each shoe placed deliberately, toes pointing toward the center. Old shoes, decades old, leather and canvas faded by time but disturbingly well preserved, toddler-sized to maybe age 10. Mason stepped back, heart hammering. This wasn't normal, this was wrong in every possible way. He pulled out his phone, no signal. Cell coverage didn't exist this far out. He'd have to drive to find help. But something compelled him to look closer first. He widened the opening and stepped inside the hidden room. The air was stale, smelled of mildew and something else, something he couldn't name. He crouched near the shoes, careful not to touch anything. Inside some of them, faded writing. Names: Tommy, Sarah, Jennifer, Michael. Children's names written in shoes no child would ever wear again. Mason felt his skin crawl. He stood, ready to leave immediately. That's when his flashlight caught something else. In the far corner, a section of concrete flooring that looked newer than the rest. He approached and knelt. The concrete patch wasn't secured, just placed over a hole. He pried at the edge. It lifted easily. Beneath it, dirt, and partially buried in that dirt, children's clothing, a faded red shirt, tiny blue jeans, a yellow dress. Mason didn't touch anything else. He walked quickly out of the church, drove to the nearest payphone, and called police. Within hours, the site was swarmed with forensic teams. They photographed everything before removing the shoes one by one. Each was catalogued, each name noted. The clothing was carefully excavated from beneath the concrete patch. Ground-penetrating radar scanned the entire church property. Several anomalies detected, possible burial sites. Excavation began. They found more clothing buried in shallow pits around the church. Personal items, a child's hairbrush, a toy car, a tarnished locket, but no bodies, no skeletal remains, no physical evidence of the children themselves, just their belongings carefully buried and hidden. Forensic analysis dated the items from approximately 1950 to 1970. DNA testing attempted on the clothing yielded nothing, samples too degraded by time. Investigators cross-referenced the names with missing persons cases. 7 names matched children who had disappeared between 1950 and 1970. Cases that had never been solved, children who vanished without trace from small towns and logging camps across northwestern British Columbia. Some disappeared while playing near their homes, others on their way to school. In every case, no witnesses, no leads, no answers, until now when their shoes and clothing surfaced in a church hidden behind an altar. Church records identified one name that drew immediate focus: Reverend Thomas Ashford, minister from 1948 to 1971. He'd resigned suddenly in 1971 without explanation and moved away. No forwarding address, no trace. Investigators followed his trail through public records. He'd relocated to Alberta, worked briefly at another church, then vanished from official records entirely. They found a death certificate eventually. Thomas Ashford died in 1982 in Manitoba, living under a slightly different name, working as a school janitor. Interviews with people who'd known him during his time in the area revealed a pattern. He was quiet, reserved, organized youth programs at the church, spent considerable time with troubled or isolated children, offering guidance and mentorship. Several of the missing children had attended his church, but without bodies, without witnesses, without physical evidence directly linking him to the disappearances, prosecutors couldn't build a case. The hidden room and buried belongings were deeply suspicious, but they weren't proof of murder. It was possible he'd been involved. It was equally possible he'd collected the items for reasons disturbing, but not criminal. The legal standard couldn't be met. 7 families received terrible closure. Their children had almost certainly been victims of foul play. But the bodies were never recovered. Memorial services were held. The shoes and clothing were eventually returned to families after being held as evidence. The church was sealed, declared a site of historical significance. It remains standing today, surrounded by chain-link fence and no trespassing signs. Local residents avoid it. Stories circulate about lights inside at night, children's voices near the property. Authorities dismiss these as legend, but they persist. Mason never took another renovation job involving old churches or abandoned buildings. The discovery haunted him, changed him. Friends said he became withdrawn, had trouble sleeping. He moved away in 2005, seeking distance from the memories. The case remains officially unsolved. The identities of the other children whose belongings were found have never been determined. 7 families got partial answers, but those answers only generated more terrible questions. Where are the bodies? What exactly happened to those children? Were there other victims never documented? And why did someone hide evidence rather than destroy it? Was it guilt, obsession, something darker? The truth died with Ashford in 1982. All that remains, shoes arranged in circles on concrete, a hidden room behind an altar, and silence that refuses to break, is 2. Ava studied whales the way some people study poetry, with reverence and obsession. 29 years old, marine biologist, Memorial University of Newfoundland. Her specialty, North Atlantic right whale migration patterns off the coast of Newfoundland and Labrador, summer 2010, Fogo Island, remote, beautiful, isolated, waters deep and cold, part of the Labrador Current bringing Arctic water south, rich feeding grounds, perfect for her research. July 22nd, she departed at 6 in the morning, alone in a 22-foot Boston whaler. Standard procedure for someone with her experience. Weather forecast, favorable, calm seas, good visibility. She radioed at 6:45, confirming she was heading 18 kilometers northeast of the island, area where she'd documented significant whale activity the previous day. At 9:32 a.m., she radioed again. Her voice had changed. She reported unusual activity in the water. Large disturbances beneath the surface, much larger than the right whales she'd been tracking. The communications officer asked her to clarify. Ava said the movements were too fast, too coordinated. Whatever was creating the disturbances was circling her boat in patterns that didn't match any known whale behavior. The officer suggested she return to the station. Ava refused. She wanted to document what she was seeing. It was unlike anything she'd encountered before. At 10:03, she radioed again. Her voice was strained now, trying to stay calm while fear crept in at the edges. The activity had intensified, multiple large objects moving beneath her boat. Her hydrophones were picking up sounds that didn't match any catalogued marine mammal vocalizations. The officer asked her to describe the sounds. Ava said they were low frequency, almost mechanical, but with variation suggesting biological origin. They were getting louder. The officer urged her to return immediately. Ava agreed, said she was starting the engine and heading back. At 10:11, Ava made her final transmission. The recording has been analyzed extensively. It remains one of the most disturbing pieces of audio evidence in Canadian maritime history. Ava's voice, panicked. She said something was wrong. The objects beneath the water were surfacing. The officer asked what she was seeing. Ava didn't answer directly. Instead, she said, "They're not whales." She repeated it twice. "They're not whales. They're not whales." The officer asked what they were. Ava began to respond. Then a sound cut through the transmission. The officer later described it as screaming, but not human screaming, high-pitched, sustained, a noise that hurt to hear even through the radio. The transmission ended. The research station tried to re-establish contact. No response. Canadian Coast Guard notified at 10:23. Search and rescue launched within 30 minutes. Weather remained perfect. Visibility excellent. By 12:40 p.m. they found her boat. Engine running, floating freely about 2 kilometers from her last recorded GPS position. The boat was undamaged, all equipment intact and functioning. Her research notes were secured under a clipboard, her water bottle half full in the cup holder, her waterproof jacket draped over the captain's chair. But Ava was gone. No sign of her anywhere on the vessel, no signs of struggle, no blood, no indication of what had happened. The Coast Guard conducted an extensive search, divers beneath the surface, helicopters with thermal imaging, ground teams along shorelines, 5 days of searching, hundreds of square kilometers covered. Nothing, no body, no clothing, no equipment from her person. She had vanished. Forensic analysis of the boat revealed details that deepened the mystery. The kill switch, designed to shut off the engine if someone falls overboard, had not been activated. Ava should have been wearing the kill switch lanyard attached to her life jacket. Her life jacket was found on the boat, properly stowed. She'd removed it at some point, a violation of safety protocols. Why? Her research equipment was examined. Cameras had been running, captured footage up until approximately 10:05. The final photographs showed something beneath the water, large dark masses just under the surface. Too large to be right whales, moving too quickly. Marine biologists who reviewed the footage couldn't identify what they were. The shapes didn't match any known species in those waters. Hydrophone recordings were analyzed by acoustics experts. The sounds captured in Ava's final minutes were unlike anything in the marine mammal database. Frequency range consistent with biological sounds, but patterns that matched nothing catalogued. Some suggested the sounds could be mechanical, perhaps a submarine. Military officials confirmed no naval operations in that area. The sounds remained unexplained. Local fishermen were interviewed. Several reported strange occurrences in those waters over the years. Unusual lights beneath the surface. Fishing equipment pulled down with tremendous force. Sounds underwater that frightened marine animals. These accounts had been dismissed as folklore. In the context of Ava's disappearance, they took on new weight, but no physical evidence could substantiate them. In the months following, other researchers working in the area reported unease about conducting fieldwork near where Ava vanished. Some refused to go alone. The research station modified protocols. All solo trips now required a second vessel within visual range. But these measures couldn't address the fundamental mystery. What happened to Ava? 5 years later, 2015, a fishing vessel in the same area reported a similar experience. Large shapes moving beneath their boat, unusual sounds through the hull. They immediately returned to port and reported it to authorities. Investigation conducted, nothing found. The case remains one of Newfoundland's most perplexing unsolved mysteries. Ava was an experienced researcher, working in familiar waters, good conditions. She disappeared in broad daylight while in radio contact. Her boat was found intact, equipment functioning. The evidence suggests she encountered something that frightened her enough to violate safety protocols. Something that ultimately led to her disappearance. But what that something was remains completely unknown. The photographs showing shapes beneath the water, the unidentified acoustic recordings, the terrifying sound captured during her final transmission. These pieces point towards something extraordinary, but provide no answers. Ava's family continues hoping for information that might explain what happened. The research community remembers her as a talented scientist whose work contributed significantly to marine conservation, and the waters northeast of Fogo Island remain a place where fishermen and researchers feel lingering unease, wondering what might be moving in the depths below. A man walked across frozen water thick enough to hold a tank. His footprints told a story that ended in the middle of nowhere. Ethan was 26, a surveyor. Worked mining operations in northern Ontario, where help was 400 kilometers away and winter could kill you in minutes. January 2018, temperatures hitting -40. Wind that stripped warmth from your skin like sandpaper on flesh. He'd been with the company 3 years, knew the terrain better than his own bedroom. Never missed a day, never gave anyone a reason to worry. January the 17th. He woke at 5:30 like always. His roommate Marcus heard him making coffee before drifting back to sleep. By 7, Ethan was gone. Nothing strange about that. He liked getting early starts. The lake between camp and the worksite had been frozen since November. Trucks drove across it daily without a second thought. Ice over a meter thick, solid as concrete. Ethan knew this. He'd measured it himself days earlier. That morning he left on foot, survey equipment in his backpack, orange safety vest bright against the snow. Workers saw him heading toward the lake around 6. He waved. Everything normal. By noon he hadn't radioed in. Protocol required regular check-ins when you worked alone in those conditions. His supervisor tried reaching him. No response. At 1 p.m. a search team assembled. 6 men, including Marcus. Weather was clear, visibility perfect. No fresh snow to hide tracks. They followed the standard route across the lake. What they found halfway across made no sense whatsoever. Ethan's footprints were clear in the dusting of snow on the ice. Normal stride, steady pace, a man walking with purpose across familiar ground. Then the prints just stopped, not at a crack, not near any disturbance. They ended mid-step as if he'd been yanked straight up into nothing. The team stood there staring at the last boot print. Beyond it, absolutely nothing, just snow and ice stretching forever. They checked the ice immediately, drilled holes 1.5 meters thick at that exact spot. No way anyone could fall through, not possible. Even if ice had cracked and refrozen instantly, there would be evidence. Watermarks, disturbed snow, fracture patterns, nothing. They searched in circles from where the tracks ended. Wider and wider. No additional prints, no sign he'd wandered off or doubled back. His footprints led from camp and stopped in the middle of the lake. That's it. By evening, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police arrived. Helicopters with thermal cameras, ground teams, search dogs. Divers went under the ice even though everyone agreed it was impossible he'd gone through. Days became a week. Search expanded over 100 square kilometers. They found nothing. Not equipment, not clothing, not one more footprint. Ethan had simply stopped existing at that precise location. They eventually reached the worksite he'd been heading toward. His equipment was there, transit still set up, field notes in his truck. He'd clearly planned to return and continue his work. But he never arrived. Forensic analysis confirmed the footprints matched his boots exactly. Tread pattern, wear marks, size, no evidence of anyone else, no snowmobile tracks, no animal prints, nothing. His coffee cup was tested, half empty, toxicology negative. Marcus was interviewed extensively. Ethan had seemed completely normal that morning, no distress, no unusual behavior. Just got dressed, made coffee, left to do his job like he'd done hundreds of times. 3 weeks later, the case took a stranger turn. A trapper named Robert was checking his line 40 kilometers southwest of the camp. Deep wilderness. Accessible only by snowmobile or on foot. February 8th afternoon. He was following a frozen creek when he saw someone standing at the tree line 50 meters away, motionless, facing away. Robert called out, asking if they needed help. No response. He called again, louder, nothing. As he got closer, he saw it was a man, average height and build, dark clothing. Something about the stance felt wrong, though he couldn't say what exactly. At 20 meters, Robert called out a third time. The figure turned slightly. Robert glimpsed the profile and immediately thought of the missing surveyor. The build matched, the height matched, the orange vest visible under the dark layer matched. Robert shouted Ethan's name. The figure didn't acknowledge him. Instead, it turned fully away and began walking backward into the forest. Not walking forward and looking back. not running, walking backward, maintaining its orientation toward the trees while moving into them. Robert was experienced in wilderness, not easily spooked, but what he saw made his blood freeze. The figure moved with fluid grace, gliding backward between trees without turning around or looking where it went. Robert ran forward, crashing through snow, desperate to catch up. When he reached the tree line, there was nothing, no tracks, no sign anyone had been there. He searched over an hour, expanding in every direction, found no evidence of the figure he'd witnessed. When he reported it to RCMP, he was visibly shaken. Officers who interviewed him said Robert was adamant about what he'd seen. The clothing matched Ethan's description. The figure had walked backward into the forest. There were no tracks. Investigators took him seriously, launched another search of that area. They brought additional resources, interviewed Robert multiple times, ensuring his story stayed consistent. It did. Every detail identical. He never wavered. He maintained he saw someone matching Ethan's description, that the person moved impossibly, that there were no tracks. Search and rescue spent days combing the area, found nothing. Ethan's family was destroyed. His parents traveled from southern Ontario to join searches. They posted flyers, offered rewards, gave media interviews, did everything possible to find their son. His mother described him as responsible and capable, not someone who took unnecessary risks. His father talked about Ethan's love for outdoors and respect for wilderness dangers. They couldn't comprehend what happened. Neither could anyone else. The mining company conducted internal investigation, reviewed all safety protocols, interviewed every worker on site that day. Everything was in order, no safety violations, no equipment failures, no unusual incidents before Ethan's disappearance. They hired private investigators to assist RCMP. Those investigators found nothing new. Months passed, the case went cold, searches were scaled back, media attention faded. Ethan's family kept advocating for answers, but no answers came. The file stayed open, classified as missing person. No body was ever recovered, no additional evidence found. The footprints ending in the middle of frozen lake remained the only clue. And they explained absolutely nothing. The mining operation continued. Workers still crossed that lake daily, but there was unspoken unease among them. Many refused to walk Ethan's route. Some reported feeling watched crossing the ice. Others claimed to see movement in peripheral vision, only to find nothing when they turned. The company eventually built a road around the lake to access the worksite. Officially for efficiency. Actually because nobody wanted to walk where Ethan's footprints ended. Robert never trapped that area again. He told friends he couldn't shake the image of the figure walking backward into trees. It haunted him. He knew on instinctive level what he'd seen wasn't entirely human. Other trappers and hunters began reporting strange things in that region, sounds that matched no known animal, tracks that appeared and disappeared without explanation, a general sense of wrongness permeating the forest. Ethan's case has been featured in missing persons databases across Canada, analyzed by search and rescue experts who can't explain what happened. The lack of evidence is what makes it so disturbing. Most disappearances leave clues, direction of travel, disturbed vegetation, something. In Ethan's case, there's only absence. The footprints led nowhere because there was nowhere to lead. He was there and then he wasn't. His family still hopes for answers, still searches for closure. But as years pass, hope fades. Northern Ontario wilderness is vast and unforgiving, keeps secrets well. Whatever happened to Ethan on that frozen lake in January 2018 remains one of those secrets. The investigation is still open. The file still sits on a desk somewhere waiting for a break that may never come. And somewhere in the frozen north, Ethan's last footprints remain etched in collective memory of everyone who searched for him. A haunting reminder that sometimes people simply vanish without explanation, without trace, without reason,